I was in one end of the house, Grace was in the other. God spoke to us both, said, you're released, you need to resign immediately. And God told me a trap is set.
Mark Driscoll's story is not just about a fall from grace. In 2014, his ministry collapsed amid scandal and accusations of bullying. But instead of disappearing for good, he returned years later with a growing new church in another state. His comeback raises serious questions about leadership, accountability, and power. How can a leader accused of wrongdoing step away, then return stronger than before? And why did he refuse the restoration plan offered to him? This is the story of a controversial comeback and the system that allowed it. The 2014 collapse. When Mark Driscoll stood at the peak of his influence in early 2014, he was running one of the fastest-growing churches in America. Mars Hill Church had blossomed from a small home Bible study into an empire spanning 15 campuses across 5 states, with an average weekly attendance exceeding 12,000. Driscoll was viral before viral was the norm. His sermons reached millions online, his books sold widely, and his conferences attracted thousands. To many, he was a charismatic leader, reshaping American evangelicalism with a hard-edged, unapologetic style. But by the end of that year, everything began to unravel. Public scandal erupted, revealing a willingness to prioritize growth and status over integrity, including a costly scheme to manufacture bestseller status for a book co-written with his wife. Allegations of plagiarism surfaced, and worse yet, secret writings leaked online showed a man who seemed to wield power with contempt rather than humility. This was more than embarrassing headlines. It began to expose a toxic culture behind the scenes. The real shock came not from outside voices, but from within Mars Hill itself. Driscoll's own elders, the men he had personally chosen to lead with him, conducted a formal investigation. Their findings were stark and damning: bullying behavior, persistent patterns of sinful conduct, and an abuse of power at the church's core. The people closest to Driscoll, who helped build the empire, had reached a devastating conclusion. The problem was the man on the stage. This internal verdict was kind of a turning point that a few outsiders really knew about, not in full. Instead of immediately removing him, those elders put together this sort of restoration plan, which was meant to keep Driscoll accountable and also give him a way back to health. Still, the fallout came quickly, and then it was basically irreversible. When Driscoll rejected that offer of correction and resigned, it left the church without its center of gravity. The whole thing, Mars Hill's foundation, built so heavily around one person, began to crumble fast, as you could feel it. Within a matter of months, 15 years of growth were undone, not gently. By the end of 2014, leadership announced the choice to dissolve Mars Hill Church, releasing the remaining campuses to survive independently or close altogether. The devastation was immediate. Thousands of members scattered, staff members left, searching for new directions, and it felt like an empire got wiped away almost overnight, which for a lot of people made it look like the story had already reached the last line. But even in that collapse, there was this quiet tension, like it wasn't fully, completely over yet. Mark Driscoll himself went missing from public view for nearly 2 years. Because of that, many assumed his ministry and his influence were done. However, the truth, and this is where it gets more complicated, was going to show itself soon enough. The fall was dramatic, but it wasn't permanent. This collapse brings up an important question right from the start. How could a church so large and seemingly so powerful fall that fast? The answer is buried beneath the surface, in the toxic blueprint that constructed Mars Hill, and the decisions made exactly when everything started breaking. Understanding the collapse means looking deeper at what exactly made Mars Hill an empire, and why it couldn't hold together when its leader was challenged. The answers begin with the blueprint Mark Driscoll wrote for the foundation of his church. The Mars Hill Blueprint. Mark Driscoll didn't just start a church in Seattle. He invented a model that shook the evangelical world. From his beginnings in 1996, Driscoll's approach was anything but soft or seeker-friendly. At a time when many pastors were smoothing the rough edges of faith to attract a broader audience, he pulled in the opposite direction, preaching a hard, masculine, take-no-prisoners Christianity specifically aimed at young men who had largely been ignored by traditional churches. This style was magnetic and effective, Driscoll became a force who could fill seats and command attention with his fiery sermons and bold personality. His church didn't just grow, it exploded in size and influence. By the early 2010s, Mars Hill was no longer a church in the traditional sense. It was an empire, 15 campuses, massive weekly attendance, millions of online sermon downloads, best-selling books, and a media platform that extended far beyond Seattle. What made it work was kinda like this blueprint thing, a system that kept circling one man's power, and well, his personality too. The leadership setup basically funneled authority so heavily into Driscoll's hands. Elders served kind of at his pleasure. Loyalty got treated like it mattered more than honesty, and the whole brand was, in practice, built around his image. The church wasn't only led by Mark Driscoll, it was Mark Driscoll. The engine of the whole empire depended on ongoing expansion. Sermons had to land on more ears, books had to climb bestseller lists, and conferences were supposed to sell out and fill the halls. Every little number had to rise, or else it felt like failure was waiting nearby. That relentless push produced real success, but it also loaded the pressure onto keeping the brand intact, no matter what the cost was. Backstage, this blueprint made a kind of culture where dissent got discouraged and accountability got weakened. The same qualities that energized folks also managed to silence the critics. That real men image and the tough talk, they drew plenty of people in, but they also hid an internal setup where power wasn't being checked and loyalty was expected, sometimes all the way up to fear or just silence. This whole design, honestly, set the stage for a crash. Once cracks showed up, the structure that had made Mars Hill seem strong couldn't really hold the damage. The blueprint was built for expansion and dominance, not for grace or for repair. And then, when the first major public scandals hit in 2014, they basically showed how fragile the core really was. Understanding the blueprint uncovers why certain scandals happened, and why the response was not just about individual mistakes, but systemic problems. It prepares us to see what happened next, the attempt to save what was left through a plan that asked for something Driscoll would not give. The Restoration Plan. In the fall of 2014, after months of investigation, the elders at Mars Hill Church completed their formal review of Mark Driscoll's leadership. These men were not outsiders or enemies, they were the closest allies Driscoll had, many of whom he had elevated himself. Their findings were serious and sobering, patterns of bullying and persistent sinful behavior at the heart of their senior pastor's conduct. Yet, instead of firing him outright, the elders took a rare and remarkable step. They offered Driscoll a restoration plan, a structured, written path to step back from leadership, submit to oversight, engage in personal healing, and ultimately be restored if he chose accountability. That document was not just a code of correction, but a lifeline for both the man and the church. This plan assumed something fundamental, that Mark Driscoll could change. It asked him to confront difficult truths, relinquish some control, and allow others to speak into his life. The invitation was clear: stay, submit, and be restored in a way that could preserve both his calling and the community he had built. But Driscoll rejected it. Rather than accept correction, he resigned. He chose to walk away instead of being held accountable. This decision was pivotal, not simply the end of his time at Mars Hill, but a refusal to follow the very path designed to save him. His resignation left Mars Hill without its architect and center of gravity. The empire built on one man's vision could not stabilize after his departure. The same concentrated power that fueled growth now revealed a dangerous vulnerability. This moment was also a test of accountability within evangelical leadership. The elders had extended grace and structure to a flawed leader, but that offer was declined. Driscoll's choice set in motion a series of events that would dismantle a church community built over nearly 2 decades. The story of the Restoration Plan is more than procedural. It reveals the core tension in leadership and culture. It asks whether a leader can truly change when accountability is on the table, and what happens when that choice is refused. This refusal would lead to Mars Hill's rapid collapse and Driscoll's unexpected silence, but it would not be the end of his story. What happened next challenges everything we think we know about accountability and second chances in ministry. The offer of restoration was the fork in the road Mark Driscoll faced, and his choice sent the entire empire tumbling and set the stage for a return that would shock many. That choice and its consequences lead us into what happened when the empire fell apart and what came after in a place far removed but strangely familiar. The swift dissolution. When Mark Driscoll rejected the restoration plan and resigned in October 2014, it left Mars Hill Church without its pivotal leader and center of gravity. The church empire he built, so dependent on his authority and vision, faced an immediate leadership vacuum that few were prepared to fill. With no plan for succession and a fractured community, the years of rapid growth began to unravel with surprising speed. What took nearly 2 decades to build unraveled in less than 120 days. By the end of October, church leadership publicly announced the dissolution of Mars Hill Church. The decision was to scatter the remaining campuses, giving them a choice to survive independently, merge with other local churches, or simply close their doors. 13 campuses across multiple states were cut loose effective January 1st of the following year, signaling the official end of a once powerful network. The fallout spread far beyond buildings. Families, volunteers, and staff members were left dispersed and uncertain about the future. This collapse ranks as one of the fastest institutional disintegrations in modern American church history. Mars Hill's abrupt fall exposed the fragility that lay beneath its explosive growth. The model that had created rapid expansion did not provide stability when the leader at its center stepped away. Without its charismatic head and with wounds left unhealed, the empire could not sustain itself. The ripple effects were felt pretty deeply by the 12,000 weekly attendees who had once kind of filled up Mars Hill's seats. A lot of people ended up scattered across new or smaller congregations, while others started to question the very culture and structure that had made such fast, almost sudden growth possible without real safeguards. The shock wasn't only that the church ended, but also how quickly this huge, massive institution dissolved like that. For months after he resigned, Mark Driscoll stayed silent. His fading out from the public eye really only made the speculation stronger about what would happen next with his ministry and leadership. Many assumed that chapter was done, that the fallout had basically closed the door on what he had built, but his silence was more like a pause, not some clean conclusion. The way Mars Hill fell is a cautionary tale. It kind of points to the dangers of putting too much authority in one individual and then neglecting accountability systems altogether. It also brings up questions about how evangelical organizations handle crises when internal leadership starts to falter. The fast dissolution was really a symptom of a bigger breakdown, not only a reaction to one man leaving. This moment marked the end of Mars Hill. However, the story of Mark Driscoll's influence was far from finished. The destruction happening underneath the surface hinted at unfinished business, and also at questions that were still looming around leadership, growth, and restoration. After Mars Hill's collapse came a period of quiet reflection for the church, the community, and for Driscoll himself. Yet amid that silence, the blueprint quietly waited for its next chapter. The Phoenix in Arizona. Nearly 2 years after resigning from Mars Hill, Mark Driscoll resurfaced in Scottsdale, Arizona. But this was not a quiet return. It was a deliberate restart. He planted Trinity Church, carrying much of the same style and structure that had defined his earlier ministry. To many observers, it looked less like reinvention and more like a reboot in a new state. Driscoll described the church's founding as a moment of divine provision. He said they found a sanctuary that was not even on the market, yet became available in the right location. The building seated around 800 people, much smaller than Mars Hill at its height, but large enough to begin again. From the start, Trinity carried Driscoll's familiar brand. Its ministries focused heavily on gender identity, with groups like Real Men and Real Women. His media platform also expanded through the Real Faith Network, which promoted his sermons, podcasts, conferences, and teaching content. The message, tone, and personality remained unmistakably his. Today, Trinity reports weekly attendance of more than 5,000 people. That is still below Mars Hill's peak of around 12,000, but attendance alone does not tell the whole story. Driscoll's influence now extends through online media, events, and expansion plans. In 2026, Trinity Church made its boldest move yet, signing a contract for a new permanent home worth $15.5 million. The office complex offered far more parking, 4 times the square footage, and double the seating capacity of its current sanctuary. After scandal, resignation, and silence, Driscoll did not simply return. He rebuilt, expanded, and proved that in the right system, a fallen leader can rise again. This fundraising plea kind of triggered unease among a lot of people who survived the Mars Hill era. You know, the ones who recognized the blueprint's pattern, like, the campus is full, God is moving, now give sacrificially. And it kind of exposes that perpetual growth engine under Driscoll's ministry, a system that gets explained as divine blessing but is powered by loyal giving. Expansion isn't framed as optional, but somehow necessary, to stay alive, so to speak. At the same time, concerns about Trinity Church's culture have also bubbled up. Former members and some investigative reports allege strict loyalty demands, surveillance of dissenters, and a controlling environment that oddly matches the criticisms once aimed at Mars Hill. Together, those claims paint a picture of a ministry that still appears to struggle with accountability and authority. Even the same word shows up again, the one that effectively ended Mars Hill's control. Mark Driscoll's return in Arizona feels like more than just a comeback moment. It's like a reminder that the whole blueprint of power and influence he led before is still walking around, still breathing, and raising real questions about leadership, restoration, and what it takes to actually change. The old echo doesn't really fade, it just lingers, while the new empire keeps growing. That persistent echo brings us to the broader challenge facing evangelical leadership today: how systems, not just individuals, need to be held accountable if history is not to repeat itself. Legacy and accountability. Mark Driscoll's story exposes a deeper problem in American evangelicalism. Accountability is often promised, but not always enforced. In 2014, Mars Hill collapsed after accusations of bullying, control, and abusive leadership. Elders investigated him and offered a restoration plan, but Driscoll refused it. Instead of submitting to that process, he resigned, disappeared for a time, and later returned with a new church in another state. His comeback raises difficult questions. Who holds powerful pastors accountable when churches are independent, networks are weak, and there is no larger governing body with authority across state lines? There is no universal registry for pastors accused of misconduct. There is no central system that prevents a leader from starting over somewhere new. In many cases, the market decides. If people show up, donate, and fill the seats, success can look like approval. Driscoll's return shows how charisma can start steamrolling accountability. A strong voice, confident leadership, and crowds that keep getting larger can make old issues feel less important, even if people still remember them. But former members and reports about Trinity Church have brought up fresh worries, including claims of tight control, loyalty demands, and heavy oversight. To critics, these allegations sound a lot like the kinds of patterns that damaged Mars Hill back then. That's why the rejected 2014 restoration plan matters at all. It was an opening for correction and healing, a real attempt at rebuilding trust. Instead of working through a clear restoration process, Driscoll came back on his own terms, like the door was closed and only one handle remained. And honestly, his story is bigger than one pastor. It points to a system that often makes kings not shepherds, rewarding expansion and influence more than character, and more than plain accountability. Without stronger guardrails and structures, the same loop can keep rolling. Scandal, collapse, silence, and then a new beginning somewhere else. Mark Driscoll's rise, fall, and return reveal the fragile balance between power, accountability, and ambition in modern evangelicalism. His story challenges us to rethink how leaders are held responsible and how communities can protect themselves. If you found this insightful, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into faith and leadership. And if this story made you question what really happens behind the pulpit, the next video on your screen uncovers another case you won't want to miss.